Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel. If you love powerful stories, deep discussions, and content that keeps you thinking, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. New videos are dropping every day, so stay tuned for more amazing content. The city of Ravenwood was always shrouded in mist, but lately, something felt off. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the alleys, whispers echoed through empty streets, and people were vanishing, erased from existence as if they had never lived there at all. The official reports blamed it on economic struggles, people moving away suddenly, but Evangeline Eva Crowley knew better. 17 years old and far too familiar with the unexplainable, Eva had grown up surrounded by strange occurrences. Her grandmother, a known occultist before she mysteriously disappeared, had once warned her, "This city holds more than just secrets, child. It holds things that don't want to be found." Now, as Eva sat in her dimly lit apartment, staring at the eviction notice in her trembling hands, she realized she was next. Her mother's best friend, Mrs. Delilah Carter, had received the same notice. Everyone in their crumbling apartment complex had. The landlord, Victor Graves, claimed the building was unsafe, that it had to be torn down immediately. But Eva had seen this pattern before: buildings emptied overnight, tenants disappearing, leaving behind only eerie silence. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., a blood-stained envelope slid under her door. The words scrawled inside sent a chill down her spine. "They are watching. The walls remember. If you want to survive, find the names of the lost before they take you too." And just like that, the nightmare began. Eva's hands trembled as she held the blood-stained envelope, her pulse pounding against her ribs. The words inside weren't just a warning, they were a challenge. Someone, or something, wanted her to dig deeper. But why? And who were they? The next morning, she found Mrs. Delilah Carter sitting on her packed suitcases outside their building, her expression a mix of exhaustion and fear. "They came last night," she whispered. "Men in black suits, no faces, no voices. Just there. Watching. I locked my door, but somehow, they were already inside." Eva felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "And they didn't take you?" "They wanted something," Mrs. Carter said, gripping Eva's wrist. "Something I don't have." She hesitated. "But you do." Eva barely had time to process those words before a piercing wail echoed through the hallway, a sound that sent the remaining tenants into a terrified frenzy. She and Mrs. Carter rushed toward the source, only to find Mr. Lawson, the building's handyman, staring blankly at a wall. His fingers twitched, his lips moved, but no words came out. Eva turned to the wall, and there, beneath peeling wallpaper, was something she hadn't noticed before, a name carved into the plaster. It wasn't just any name. It was her grandmother's. And below it, fresh and dripping with something dark, was Eva's own. Eva's breath hitched as she traced her fingers over the carved names on the wall. Her grandmother's name, Margaret Holloway, stood stark against the faded wallpaper, but it was the fresh inscription of her own name, Eva Holloway, that sent ice through her veins. Someone, or something, had put it there. But why? Mrs. Carter took a sharp step back, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave, Eva. Whatever's happening. It's calling for you." But Eva wasn't leaving, not yet. She turned to Mr. Lawson, who still stood in a daze, his eyes glazed over. "Mr. Lawson, who did this?" she asked. He blinked once. Twice. Then, in a voice not entirely his own, he muttered, "It was never meant to be erased." Eva's stomach twisted. What wasn't? Mr. Lawson's eyes snapped to hers, suddenly clear, suddenly sharp. The truth. That night, unable to sleep, Eva dug through the dusty boxes her grandmother had left behind. The town archives, old letters, faded photographs, she searched for anything that could explain why her family name was etched into a cursed wall. Then she found it. An old newspaper clipping from 1956. A trial. A disappearance. And one horrifying headline. "The Holloway curse returns. A daughter must pay for her mother's sins." Eva's blood ran cold. She wasn't just part of the mystery. She was the mystery. Eva's hands trembled as she clutched the fragile newspaper clipping. The ink had faded, but the weight of the words remained as chilling as ever. A daughter must pay for her mother's sins. What sins? What had her grandmother done? Determined, she grabbed her coat and rushed to the town's archives, ignoring the cold bite of the night air. The Holloway name had haunted her long enough. It was time to face the truth. Inside the dimly lit archives, she flipped through yellowed records, her heart pounding with each discovery. Margaret Holloway, accused of witchcraft. Not just any accusations, disappearances, strange occurrences, a town's silent fear. But the trial was never completed. Eva's pulse quickened as she reached the final page of a sealed report. Margaret Holloway was last seen on November 4, 1956. Witnesses report she entered Holloway Manor, but never came out. A chill ran down Eva's spine. Her childhood home. Just then, a noise echoed through the empty room. A faint whisper, her name. She whipped around, but there was no one there. Only shadows stretching along the walls. Then, from the very back of the archives, a single book fell to the floor, its title burned into the cover. The Holloway Blood Debt. Eva's breath caught. She wasn't just searching for the truth. The truth was already searching for her. Eva stood at the gates of Holloway Manor, her breath coming in sharp, anxious bursts. The house loomed before her, its windows dark and lifeless, yet filled with a presence she could feel deep in her bones. This was where it all ended, or began. Pushing open the rusted gate, she stepped onto the overgrown path. With each step, the whispers grew louder. They weren't coming from outside. They were in her head. Calling her home. The door creaked open before she even touched it. The air inside was thick, damp, alive. Dust floated in the moonlight, swirling in unnatural patterns. Eva's heart pounded. Then, the temperature dropped. The grand hallway stretched into darkness, yet a single candle flickered at the end, casting shadows that moved against the light. She swallowed hard and stepped forward. A voice echoed. "You have her eyes." Eva froze. The sound came from the library. A slow, deliberate creak came from the rocking chair inside. As she turned the corner, she saw it, a woman's figure, shrouded in mist, rocking ever so slightly. Her grandmother? No, it was older, its face distorted, shifting between a whisper of familiarity and a grotesque, hollowed-out horror. "She made a deal, child," the figure whispered. "And now, it's your turn to pay." The candle flickered out. The room was swallowed in darkness. And then, the screaming began. Eva's pulse pounded as she stumbled backward, her breath ragged. The room was suffocating, the walls seeming to close in. The shadows twisted, forming grotesque figures that loomed over her. The ghostly voice grew louder, layers upon layers of whispers merging into a deafening roar. "You cannot run from the debt, child." The candle in her shaking hand flickered violently before extinguishing completely. Darkness swallowed her. Then, silence. A chilling wind rushed past, carrying the scent of something ancient, something wrong. Eva felt something behind her. Ice-cold fingers brushed against her shoulder. She spun around, her flashlight flickering erratically. And there it was. The entity, no longer a shifting mist, but a solid, horrifying reality. It wore a human form, yet its face was a grotesque distortion of agony and rage. Its hollowed eyes locked onto hers. She made the deal. Her grandmother. Eva's mind reeled. The pieces clicked together, the whispers, the visions, the warnings. A curse passed down through generations. "And now, you seal the pact." A dagger appeared in her hand, ancient, rusted, pulsating with something sinister. The entity stepped closer, its mouth stretching into a wicked grin. She had only two choices: surrender to the darkness or fight the fate written in blood. As the first light of dawn touched the cursed house, a single scream shattered the night. The courtroom was silent, the weight of Eva's words hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Across from her, the man who had tormented her family for generations, Victor Holloway, sat stiffly, his mask of arrogance beginning to crack. "This ends today," Eva declared, her voice unwavering. She turned to the judge, her hands gripping the worn pages of an old ledger, evidence of debts fabricated, contracts manipulated, lives stolen under the guise of law. Generations had suffered under Holloway's grip, their future stolen before they even had a chance. Her grandmother had fought and lost. But Eva? She refused to be another victim. Holloway's lawyer rose, his words carefully rehearsed. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a desperate attempt to rewrite history. Miss Carter's claims," Eva cut in, "are the truth. And I have proof." She placed a final document on the table, Holloway's own signature on a forged contract. A contract meant to keep families trapped in an unbreakable cycle of debt and silence. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Then, in a single moment that shifted the course of history, he uttered the words Eva had been waiting for. "The court rules in favor of the plaintiff." Tears blurred Eva's vision, but she held her head high. The chains of the past had finally been broken. And for the first time in generations, her family, and others like hers, could finally be free.